other researchers and other leaders in the psychedelic world been talking about how we're going to make that actually a reality and manifest those ideas, because that's something that's really been influencing my work and what I'm doing. So I'm just curious.
Well, I think one point is to make more available or accessible funding and research to women, because in science in general there are more men than women doing research, and we can talk about this for hours why, but this is a fact. The other thing, and Alicia Danford was talking about this, the majority of research in psychotherapy with psychedelics is quantitative, and the qualitative research is much more feminine, because you are not imposing like questions to the people and like questionnaires and numbers, so you just ask open questions and the data are talking to you. I mean, so it's much more feminine, like much more soft, much more. So this was something that Alicia Danford was also addressing in his interview. And again, the other theme is about language. No, I mean, you never will hear talk of, for example, David Nichols or Ronald Griffiths talking about love or interconnection, but you can hear Alicia Danford or Mariko Segamano talking about this. So I mean, and it's science also. I mean, you can talk about this from a scientific point of view. I mean, maybe with qualitative research, or you need other tools, but it's something that you can also address inside the scientific paradigm, or mixing qualitative and quantitative research also. So I mean, there are a bunch of ways to do that. Yeah. But I think the most important thing is to open the doors to women to do more research.
Yeah, and the psychedelic community is certainly not in a vacuum separate from the rest of society. So the problems we see in society overall are very much reflected in the psychedelic community, and so there's work to be done on all fronts. I could say tomorrow I do feel very good that our psychedelic panels are balanced with men and women, and in fact, to come back to your point about the subjective experience research, we have Nishay Devanagh, good friend, who's an expert on this exact subject, and she's one of our featured speakers about psychedelic research, and I agree that is a very so much of we know that the questions you ask are going to inform what answers you get. Yeah. So just the fact of doing a study that asks certain questions is already putting a framing, it's already putting a lens on it. So there is something, I guess, intrinsically more feminine about just listening to what someone's subjective experience is versus imposing a certain question in the first place. So I look forward to hearing what Nishay has to say about that, actually, this weekend. All right, we have
a lot of questions. Yes.
How the pharmaceutical industry is dealing with this psychedelic revolution? Because they're going to lose a lot of money if people, instead of using antidepressives, use psilocybin, for example.
I really don't know. Do you have information about that?
What was that?
How the pharmaceutical industry is reacting to this new paradigm of medicines that you just take 2-3 times and you don't need to take every day. I'm not sure. I'm sure that they are doing lobby to not to stop, but to make it more slow to happen. But I don't have the data.
When I've heard Rick Doblin get asked this question, who's the executive director of MAPS, he's kind of says like they don't seem to be really paying much mind to it because the psychedelic therapy isn't profitable from the traditional model, so they're not necessarily really even paying a lot of attention. It doesn't seem to be that they're getting in the way. I know that's like a thing that's a story that we say, and there's reasons to have suspicions of pharma and all of this. I wouldn't necessarily think that it doesn't seem they are, right? Because right now, FDA has approved phase 3 trials for MDMA, and they have designated it as a breakthrough therapy. Yeah. So the FDA is on board and helping to make this happen. So I think it is happening, yeah.
Hey, thank you both. So, on this question, let's imagine a world in which there's a lot of progress made. It's led by folks like MAPS. Now you're in a situation in which it's okay to have a therapeutic setting, But the revolution, as this person described it, was driven by people who were using it in a using it as recreational. Now you've got a quasi-legal situation in which it's therapeutic, and therapeutic application is okay. But if it opens to recreational use, you lose that monopoly on the therapeutic. The money stops flowing. The incentives to do the therapeutic application might be weakened. Is there a sense in the community that you're on the cusp of this, and what happens after you succeed in this way?
Yeah, I mean, there is a debate there. I mean, people is saying, okay, the psychotherapeutical context is okay, but what about the spiritual use of psychedelics or the recreational use of psychedelics? I mean, I think, and there is a strategy on that of leading first the psychotherapeutical use, and Rick Dolan is talking about this in the book and his talks. David Nichols also is talking about that. I mean, maybe in the future it's going to be possible to have a spiritual context, and now it's happening with ayahuasca in some places that you have access to ayahuasca if you are in a church. So that may happen in the future, but it's going to be step by step. And the recreational use, I mean, by the one hand, I mean, I think it may happen, as is happening with the marijuana, but I always say, I mean, even though they make it illegal, I mean, I think actually is the moment in the history that more people is taking psychedelics recreationally, even more than in the 60s. I mean, and there are all these research chemicals that they are not illegal. I mean, they are still legal, like the 1-PLSD in some countries, and I mean, there are thousands of psychedelics now. I mean, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, they were a dozen or 2 dozens of psychedelics, a little more maybe, but now there are literally thousands of psychedelics out there, and more than the 50% of them are legal. So, I mean, and you have internet, and you can buy it with Bitcoin, or you can buy it even with euros. I mean, so we never had easier access to psychedelics in the history of humanity than now. I mean, and I think this is so. I mean, there are psychedelic festivals all over the world. I mean, you have Boom Festival. I mean, you have in every European country there is a psychedelic festival. You have the Sora. I mean, and they are announcing it as a psychedelic festival, and nothing is happening. I mean, the police is not going there to bust anything. I mean, and I mean, it's something that is becoming mainstream, really, the use of psychedelics. I mean, maybe in weird ways. I mean, because we have the prohibition, we have these laws that you can go to jail, or they fine you with a lot of money, but at the same time, I mean, it's so easy to find psychedelics if you are really willing to find them. So, I mean, it's a really interesting thing to discuss, but I think it's not so, like, easy to say, like, okay, they are illegal, we can do it. I mean, it's not true. I mean, people is doing it anyway.
Yeah, actually, and thank you for asking that question. What I'll add to that is, well, I think that's true, but that also depends who you are.
Yeah.
And I would say for me, from my personal perspective, medicalization is not the end goal. And I also don't even think I think it's a false distinction in the first place, medical versus recreational. You know, this is arbitrary. What is medicine, right? So, in my opinion, the use of psychedelics or any other drugs, whether it's for medicinal, spiritual, or personal reasons, whether they be recreational or otherwise, is a human right. And I will keep doing this work in that regard.
I want to say thank you for writing the book. I'm looking forward to the English translation too.
Thank you.
There's a blockchain-based decentralized platform called Seemeth I've been experimenting with lately.
Oh,
and
thank you for the information.
Yeah, if you could release it chapter by chapter on there, could be very helpful for people to find it, and also potentially very lucrative. Like I just posted a random video the other day, and they call them whales, super rich people. He clicked upvote, and it was worth like $1,000. Like, just out of the blue. No, wasn't even a very interesting video. So
let's talk later.
Yeah, for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Yeah, and I think that's an interesting example of how crypto can empower things that haven't traditionally had good routes for it. Empowering content creation in new innovative ways that are beyond the advertising models. You can have sites like Steemeth, and you put your content up, people like it, they can contribute very easily. And yeah.
Great. I think there's another question.
Is there another question?
Yeah.
All right.
As you said before that you would like to empower women in your guild, and as a physicist and mind researcher and invisible translator, I would love to know how people like me can be supported to keep traveling, inspiring others to explore the ways to reconnect with nature by perceiving through the skin, or by training your creature to feel more and think less, understanding how we lose awareness by thinking. So how can people like me can be supported to keep doing what we passionate to do?
Yeah, I'll just take after your example, I guess. Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily one answer, but I appreciate that perspective. And I know for me, I tried to integrate that into my own way of being more, and try to create the space whenever possible. Yeah. And